What is meat? A basic the definition of meat is, quote, parts of animals fit for human consumption, end quote. This broad definition refers to both the edible carcass and the offal. The definition of meat varies from species and to species. For example, the hide is removed from beef, veal, and lamb, but for pork and poultry, it is considered part of the meat. The carcass includes the following components: lean muscle tissue, bones, fats, connective tissues, and offal. Offal is not actually part of the carcass. It is the edible byproducts produced in creating the carcass. Most people consider meat as the steak, roast, or chop, but when considering the whole carcass, we need to consider anatomy. When alive, animals use their muscles to do specific tasks. Certain muscles are used for locomotion and movement, and cattle spend a good portion of their time standing, so they develop thick support muscles. When considering which meat to use for cooking, we must consider the use of the muscle while the animal was alive. Muscle sections that are used more frequently or or perform arduous tasks will be tougher than more sedentary muscle groups. Muscles that are located along the back are less frequently are used less frequently than muscles that are at the extremities. Certain deep muscles, when isolated and trimmed, have been found to be extremely tender. These muscles may be too small or difficult to fabricate, so may not be considered marketable. The age and method of raising the animals also determine a level of tenderness. What may be considered a what may be considered a quality cut in one species can be quite tough in another. Show general drawing of a sedentary versus a motion muscle. Muscle fibers. There are two basic types of muscle fibers: smooth and skeletal. Smooth muscle fibers are found in the digestive and circulatory systems and are primarily involved muscles. These are generally found in offal products such as the tripe. Skeletal muscles are the more Skeletal muscles are the more typical meat muscles. They attach to bone to allow the animal to move and perform specific tasks. Skeletal muscles are formed from long, slender muscle cells that form bundles. Muscle bundles are tied together with spring like myofibrils, which are able to expand and contract in movement. A collagen protein layer called meristysome surrounds these bundles, acting like a layer of plastic wrap. The perimysium surrounds the bundles. The thicker the perimysium is, the tougher the muscle. The entire larger muscle is enclosed with a layer called the epimysium. Layers become thicker and tougher as the animal matures. Muscle fibers are aligned in a directional pattern called the grain. When cutting meats, it is important to understand the direction of the grain so as to cut across it to ensure the most tender surface possible. Certain cuts that have an obvious grain can be extremely tough if the cut is made with the grain as opposed to across it. The color of muscle fibers depends on the type of muscle and its species. Muscles that receive their energy directly from the bloodstream will be redder in color. The red pigment is due to myoglobin, a protein that holds oxygen to the muscles. Beef, lamb, and venison all have a darker red meat due to a large amount of myoglobin present. Pork, veal, and various types of poultry are a light color because much of the energy for their muscles is achieved anaerobically. Myoglobin will give meats different color hues depending on length of exposure to oxygen. When meat cuts an are in an anaerobic state, such as in a vacuum bag, the myoglobin is a dull purplish red. Once cuts are exposed to oxygen, they bloom and become a bright red. This is termed oxymyoglobin. After being exposed to oxygen for some time, the oxymyoglobin converts to methmyoglobin and turns a brown or gray color. This is usually an indication that the meat is spoiling. Fats. The different species have different types of lipid combinations. The fats from a hog is chemically different from that of beef, as is that of lamb. The taste and melting points of different fats can reflect different uses in the kitchen. Pork fat is considered more palatable than beef or lamb fat. Lamb fat is very strong in flavor and has a different mouthfeel. This is due to the levels of saturated fats such as stearic or palmitic fatty acids. The diet of the animal will also affect the flavor of the fat and therefore the taste of the overall meat. Grass-fed or foraged animals will tend to have a stronger and more pronounced flavor than grain-fed animals. Diet also alters the levels of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. For example, grass-fed animals will have a higher omega-3 count. Grain-fed animals will have an imbalance of omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, with omega-6 being higher. It is important to have a balance of omega-3 and 6 in the diet. There are 4 basic categories used when discussing fat on meat carcasses. 1. Substances. 1. Subcutaneous fat. Fat found directly under the hide or skin of the animal. It is very dense and good for barding or larding pork. we're learning. Pork fatback is an example of subcutaneous fat. 2. Lumbar or kidney fat. Fat found inside the the carcass cavity surrounding the kidney and pelvic region. This fat is very hard and crumbly with little moisture, which makes it very good for rendering and frying. 3. Intermuscular fat. Fat that is found between muscle groups. It is used to help guide the butcher between muscle cuts. 4. Intramuscular fat. This is also known as marbling. Marbling is fat found within lean muscle tissues between muscle bundles. When well marbled meat is cooked, the fat melts, infusing the cut with flavor and leaving a weakened muscle fiber, which translates into tenderness. Marbling is considered a main indicator of quality. Connective tissue. The most common connective protein in meat is collagen. Collagen is the basic filament that holds together muscle fibers. It is found throughout the carcass and attaches muscle to muscle. Collagen fibers can be described as white, silver, or clear, depending on their thickness or density. Large collagen tendons appear as white, thin bands on muscles, or appear silver between muscles. The parenchyma covering the surrounding tiny muscle bundles is particularly clear. Collagen directly relates to the toughness of a cut of meat. Muscles that are load bearing or are required to do heavy lifting have thicker collagen bands and coarse muscle fibers. If applying a rapid dry cooking method to these types of motion muscles, the meat will be very tough. A piece of meat from a less active area will have a much finer fiber and less collagen support material and will be tender. The collagen breaks down during a slow, moist cooking application. These fibers unravel and fall apart, dissolving into the liquid. The muscles will become extremely tender if allowed the proper time and heat to do so. The, the collagen laden muscles tend to have much more flavor than fine fiber tender cuts. When broken down in the sauce of a dish, the collagen gives a texture or smoothness to that sauce. In culinary terms, this texture is part of what might be called savory or umami, even though other factors also contribute to this. Another connective tissue that's frequently found on meat cut is the material that connects muscle to bone. This substance, known as known as periosteum or bone sheath, is actually part of the bone covering that is pulled away when meat is boned out. On younger animal carcasses, which is the case for most of the meat items we see today, the bones are not ossified or fully hardened. This sheath ends up on the meat item. It can be very tough and does not break down readily as collagen does. It should be removed even on moist cooked meats unless the meat is cooked for an extremely long time. Bone connectiveness looks similar to collagen, but the pinkish in color can be rough to the touch. Elastin, another common connective tissue, is found along the back and into the neck of the carcass. It is yellowish and has an elastic feel. It is thick and tough, but is found close to some prized sedentary muscle cuts, so it is necessary to remove it as well. Bones. Although we do not actually eat the hardened bones of animals, they are an integral part of what is considered meat. Bones end up on the plate as part of a large variety of cuts. The bone-in steak or chop, the barbecued or roasted chicken, spare ribs, and the classic crown roast will not be possible without leaving the bones attached. Bones hold many connective tissues which dissolve into water when producing stock. These stocks or broths can be reduced to make rich, smooth sauces. The fatty, rich marrow found in certain bones is used in some classical dishes. And in the fabrication of meat, bones play an important role for the butcher. Bones are used to identify specific locations on the carcass to make a cut without damaging muscles. Bones act as a roadmap for carcass breakdown. Every typical four-legged mammal used for meat has the same basic bone and muscle structure. Of course, they are not all divided the same, but there are always certain similarities. When deciding to fabricate a cut of meat, whether a full carcass or an individual cut, it is important to understand the bone structure. Offal. Offal can be best described as the edible byproducts of meat carcasses. Examples would be organ meats such as liver, kidney, heart, brain, tripe, certain glands, and intestinal tracts. In addition, the cheeks, tail, and tongue are part of offal. In many cultures, offal is considered a delicacy. Organ meat, such as liver and kidneys, are high in iron, which translates into a rich flavor. The tail has some meat and a lot of collagen and is typically used for rich braises. Rich braises. Offal is generally inexpensive but requires some skill to properly cook. Organ meats are composed of fibers that are different from those of lean muscle. Membranes, bone vessels, and connectives need to be removed on livers and kidneys. Some offal is considered the epitome of high cuisine. An example would be the fattened duck or goose liver known as foie gras. This meat has a consistency that resembles butter and has a rich flavor. Other delicacies Other delicacies, damn it, other delicacies would be the sweetbread or the thymus gland of veal. Damn it. Other delicacies would be the sweetbread or thymus gland of veal. When properly prepared, this soft, structured gland can be eaten with a fork. This type of offal is an exception to the inexpensive nature of offal. They are in high demand and warrant a high cost. Organ meats tend to be highly perishable and therefore must be used fresh within a week of slaughter or purchased frozen. Be sure to keep frozen items below 32 degrees and minus 4 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees and minus 18 degrees Celsius to ensure the formation of small ice crystals and minimize damage. Some offal is considered the epitome of high cuisine. An example would be the fattened duck or goose liver known as foie gras. This meat has a consistency that resembles butter and has a rich flavor. Other delicacies would be the sweetbread or the thymus gland of veal. When properly prepared, this soft, structured gland can be eaten with a fork. This type of offal is an exception to the inexpensive nature of offal. They are in high demand and warrant a high cost. Organ meats tend to be highly perishable and therefore must be used fresh within a week of slaughter or purchased frozen. Be sure to keep frozen items below 32 degrees and minus 4 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees and negative 18 degrees Celsius to ensure the formation of small ice crystals and minimize damage.